I think as a small company, it's almost necessary to care more about the value that you bring someone versus the model of your business, because you're probably not going to be able to compete with other companies in terms of like price or kind of the colder aspects of business. But I think building trust and truly caring about other people's problems and trying to solve them is just something that you don't get a lot of quantity in these days, especially in B2B.
Welcome to the Warehouse Insider Podcast. I am your co-host, Cliff Hardesty from Barcode Depot. I'm joined alongside my co-host, Jeremy Hess from BullsEye Computing. How are you doing, Jeremy? We're going to give you all a little bit of our background and why we've been partners for about a year or so now, and the reason we decided to start a podcast. I'll give you a little bit of my background. So my dad, Gary Hardesty, back in 1996, he was working in the barcoding industry, and he was helping warehouses with their AP and their networking and within the warehouse. He was selling them barcoding equipment, and he noticed people were replacing this equipment and they weren't getting it repaired. So he thought, why don't I repair this equipment? And it just kind of took off from there. So he started repairing people's barcoding equipment, barcode scanners, things like that. And he was saving his customers a lot of money, and it just kind of took off from there. I remember he said the first thing he sold was a cable, and just the service he provided from selling that first cable, someone remembered him, and it just kind of took off from there. It started with, through word of mouth, and and it just kind of took off. So it was kind of interesting, growing up, seeing your dad working in, his office there in the house, and you didn't really know what he did because it was such like a niche market, and I'm sure it was the same for you, Jeremy. Growing up, your parents started this company, you never knew really what they did. So it's pretty cool. And so from there, we started as a repair depot. So we repaired equipment, and then we worked with a lot of 3PLs. So for people that don't know, a 3PL is like third-party logistics. So it'd be like, think of a DHL or an NFI. They have a customer that they're doing warehousing for. And Dad got in with one of these 3PLs, and they have sister companies or sister sites, across the country. They'll have one in Atlanta, one in Dallas, one in, say, Southern California. And then from there, they all talk to each other. Hey, what are you using for this? What are you using for that? And it just kind of took off with word of mouth. And so that was a big part of how we grew over the last 20 or so years. We've been around now for 28 years. And I joined the company back in 2019 and, did a lot with the marketing and things like that. So we're in doing other marketing platforms, LinkedIn and podcast ads, things like that. So we started off as a repair depot, repairing, barcoding equipment, barcode scanners and terminals and all this old stuff that, used to break more than I guess it does now. It's, a lot of this stuff's become throwaway, but we got into labeling too. So now we can help customers with rack labels, hanging placards, staging signs, really any type of sign that you would see throughout the warehouse we can help with. And then we've also got into a little bit with software with partnerships like BullsEye. With Jeremy's company, we're able to offer WMS solutions and inventory control, things like that to our customers now. And then we also have a few other software providers like in the retail space that we work with. So it's pretty neat the way we've evolved. We're able to help customers now with asset management. One thing I've found is a lot of customers will have, $500,000 to $1 million worth of RF equipment hanging around the warehouse, whether that's barcode scanners,
easily,
tablets,
probably.
Whatever that might be. I'm sure you see it too, Jeremy, when you go into a warehouse. And it's just laying around. Warehouse managers, general managers, IT managers, whoever's in charge of that equipment in the warehouse, they don't know where it's at. It's getting lost on a shelf. It's, wherever it's at, it's, they don't really know where it's at. It's such a large capital expenditure, and to not have some type of accountability for it is kind of insane to think about. So we're helping a large customer now with some asset management lockers. So what they're able to do is they're probably going to have, when it's all said and done, probably 9 or 10 lockers, all have about 27 doors. They can put all of their equipment in there. Right now, they're using like a Zebra WT63. So for people that don't know, that's a wearable device. It's actually mounted to your wrist, and then it's Bluetooth to a ring scanner that would go on your finger. So that'll all be in a locker. Someone would go up to it, tap their NFC badge on it. The the locker already knows who it is through the software and whatever permissions are granted to that person. And then they can go in and take that device, and then it's assigned to them through that, for the whole shift. Once they go back and check it back in, it'll ask a couple questions. Is this device been damaged in any way? Can they use it again? Things like that. So there's different levels of accountability there. So yeah, we've grown into a lot of different offerings that we can provide our customers now. So but yeah, that's just a little bit about us and Barcode Depot. And now I'll let you kind of tell your story, Jeremy.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm Jeremy Hess. I'm from BullsEye Computing. Similar story to Cliff's. Our company was started by my parents back in 98, I think. That was the year before I was born, fun fact. I have a background much more software heavy than Cliff probably does. I got my degree in computer science and eventually ended up in the family business, which was super exciting. And we started out as essentially an Oracle consulting company. Eventually ended up developing our own products that kind of enhanced what Oracle was doing with ERPs. So enterprise resource planning systems that were specifically built for larger companies that needed to model their operations in a way that was, maybe too complex for Excel or just the basic way that people do it in small and medium-sized companies. We had started out with a couple of very large customers that we have kept to this day. And we've kind of always maintained that model of providing really high quality service to a select few number of people. And that's mostly been through my family and our very close friends and coworkers. And so now we're trying to take that into we're trying to expand that out. So we're building our customer base, we're building our offerings, and we're taking all the knowledge that we've gained through the last 25 years and trying to put that into more of a process-oriented structure. So that's kind of the background on us. We've been working with Barcode Depot, I think, since 2018, right? Or 19 was when probably Gary and Elizabeth, I think.
So what's cool is a lot of people might not know this is I think Jeremy's mom, Elizabeth, actually found us through our website, and she was looking for someone to repair some of the RF equipment that one of y'all's customers had.
Yeah.
It might have been like a Honeywell CK71 or something like that.
Probably.
And that's kind of how the relationship started. And it was just really neat how it happened like that. And then the more I talked to Elizabeth, I could just feel her passion that she had for BullsEye. All the things that, anybody that talks to Elizabeth, you can just feel the passion that she has for what she does. And she really believes in it. And she just kind of has that founder mentality. She's always just optimistic. That's kind of how my dad is. And you notice certain traits in entrepreneurs and founders. There's certain characteristics that have made them successful over the years. So it's kind of cool seeing the similarities between your mom and then my dad. So it's pretty cool how it started. And so yeah, we've been working with BullsEye for a few years now, and actually got to go up to Baltimore where BullsEye's at and visit Jeremy and
the team this year, right?
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. So yeah, it's been great. And I'll say one thing too is I think our values line up as well. When we were on that call with one customer, I was on the call and it was more of like a consultative, consultative. That's kind of like where they were coming from. Is like they were just trying to learn more about the customer and like how they could help them. And I felt like it wasn't very pushy at all. And it was like, let's learn about you and see if we're even a good fit. We're not going to try to sell you on something that you don't need. We want to help you if we can, but if we can't, we're not a good fit. We're going to tell you that, and then we're still going to help you through certain processes or whatever it might be. So I think that really kind of stood out to me. And I was like, okay, cool. This is, they kind of have the same values as I do, because I've never, I've always wanted to help my customers. I never wanted to try to sell them something that they, weren't going to use, because I think both of us were kind of in that relationship selling. We're in it for the long run. There's a reason why our companies have been, around for over 20 something years. It's because we truly do care about the customer and the solution that they're going to be using. So, so I will say that, it's been a nice part of the relationship so far.
Oh yeah. I think as a small company, it's almost necessary to care more about the value that you bring someone versus the model of your business, because you're probably not going to be able to compete with other companies in terms of like price or kind of the colder aspects of business. But I think building trust and truly caring about other people's problems, trying to solve them is just something that you don't get a lot of quantity in these days, especially in B2B.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of times, it's just trying not to be seen as a vendor either, right? You want to be seen as a problem solver, like a strategic resource, right, with your customers. And I think you see it more with
Absolutely.
you guys of being in the software. You're more entrenched with your customer, and that's something I feel like sometimes we struggle with a little bit. Is we work with customers all across the country, and we're a small company, so we kind of struggle to keep up with all of our customers because there's a lot of vertical movement. Once we get to know a general manager, IT manager at a warehouse or something on the West Coast, it's like as soon as we build a relationship with them, they're moving up in the company, and what we are doing with them now as it doesn't really, it's not like their problem anymore, right? So so there's a lot of that, or there's like with these 3PLs, they'll move from different locations to a sister site. Like we had one customer that they were working in Kentucky and then they moved to Utah, but it was still for the same company and the customer and everything. So there's a lot of that we kind of battle with, and it's it's just the nature of the industry. I mean, that's just it is what it is. So that's been kind of my challenge, and what I've been trying to work on is being seen more as like a problem solver and a strategic resource for our customers instead of just a vendor. So I think that's what we're all like, ultimately trying to get to.
Yeah, and I think partnerships play into that a lot, especially as a small company, is finding people who are adjacent to you, like us with Barcode Depot, and being able to provide the whole solution.
Exactly.
It's like almost necessary, in my opinion.
Yep. And I'm glad you brought that up too, is, helping our customers instead of just with barcode readers or mobile computers, tablets, whatever it is. It's like, what is the problem that we're trying to solve here? Let us, help you, solve this problem, whatever it might be. If it's inventory control, asset management, let us know, and through our network of partnerships, we'll be able to solve this problem. So I think that's where we're trying to get ultimately with our customers, is just being more solutions based instead of just selling or just being known for hardware.
Speaking of problems, and jump right into our first problem of this podcast.
The reason we started this podcast is to bring value to our target audience, to who we feel is a warehouse professional. So we want to bring value to you guys that are working in the warehouse, whether you're an IT professional, warehouse manager, general manager. There's so many different titles that we see. IT analyst. I mean, there's all different types of titles that we work with within the warehouse. So what we're trying to do is just bring value to you guys. Whether you're in a 3PL, warehouse, e-com, whatever that might be. So that was the whole reason we decided to start this podcast with me and Jeremy, is to kind of give you the inside scoop, if you will, from the hardware standpoint, and then from Jeremy's expertise in the software. So that's what we're going to try to do with this episode and this show in general, is just to provide value. So any type of feedback you can give us, please let us know. We're going to be talking about industry trends, studies, anything within the logistics industry that we think that can bring value for you guys is what we're going to tailor this show towards. So we thought for the first episode, we would give you a little bit of our background and a little bit of our partnership, just to kind of give you a background of where we're coming from and things like that. So the first study that we're going to talk about is a study from Blue Star, actually our distributor that we use. Shout out to you guys. Blue Star is great. This is a survey that they did. They interviewed 100 logistics professionals in the retail supply chain, whether that was through like apparel, e-commerce, electronics, retail, T&L. They surveyed 100 of these executives to learn more about like the return process. That's a huge pain point for any company nowadays. I think every company's kind of going up against Amazon, right? It's kind of that Amazon effect. Consumers are expecting fast, free returns now. I know in my personal life, when I buy something off Amazon, and if it doesn't If I don't like it, it's just so easy to return it. I'm just going to return it. So I'm not sure if you want to elaborate on that, Jeremy. I know you probably are the same way.
Yeah, I don't think I've returned an item in my personal life in like a couple years, maybe 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
If I get something online and
you're just stuck with it.
Yeah. I'm just stuck with it.
Yeah.
But I think, especially with some of these companies, you can't compete with a company like Amazon, depending on your size and how much process you have built into your returns management. What kind of companies were surveyed in here? Do you know size?
They were mid to large size.
Okay.
Customers, yeah. So it was out of the 100 survey, I believe 75% was within the e-commerce retail space. So They were all executives that were heavily involved in the return process. So they were saying some of the main reasons for return loss was human error, which is to be expected, right? Items that were being damaged or lost in transit, and not really theft as commonly believed. So
is loss the number one problem in returns, or what are some of the problems that are in the returns management process?
So
the challenges.
What the survey was saying was it was mainly human error. So as human error, I would assume that is the devices or the boxes or whatever the packages are that are being returned back to the warehouse. And I'm sure you've seen it in warehouses too. It's like you go into a warehouse and you ask like where the return items are, and like a lot of times like they either don't know or it's just kind of piled up in an area, and it's just it's like we'll get to it when we get to it kind of deal. So I think a lot of the human error is just when it's being delivered back on the truck and they don't really know where to take it, or if they're just kind of sitting it off somewhere.
Yep.
And and some warehouse worker doesn't know where it goes, or they don't know what to scan. So I think a lot of that has to do with the human error, and then also the items being damaged, depending on what it is, in the transportation of it being going back to the warehouse, or it being lost. So I think those are two huge pain points, which from the warehouse perspective, you can control the human error a little bit with maybe better training and better processes. And you could probably talk more about that, but a lot of those things are kind of out of their control if it's being damaged or lost in transit.
Yeah. Something that we've seen with our customers is in the quality control department, you just don't have ownership of it after it leaves your warehouse, right? So if you're going through a carrier and they have a number of hubs that these packages are getting transported through, you have no visibility into what's happening. They usually get damaged or thrown around. I mean, they're handling like thousands of boxes a day. And some things that are supposed to be fragile or like this side up just aren't. And so I think, like you said, a lot of it is just out of the control of the vendor or whoever's handling the returns, kind of in the hands of those carriers.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for error, right? When it's being returned back. And kind of what we just talked about is just like, what's the process of when it is returned, So also too, a little bit about like the technology utilization. You as a warehouse professional listening to this, you're probably using a handheld barcode scanner, label printer, tablet, handheld computer, mobile computer, mobile carts, maybe like a Newcastle cart. So it'd be interesting, to get y'all's feedback of what actual technology that y'all are using for returns. That would be interesting to hear. And then a little bit too, not as prevalent, but RFID and tags are being used in the return process too. So I thought that was interesting.
I mean, RFID has been around for a long time, but in my opinion, it's kind of like AI is now, where like 10, 15 years ago, companies were really, well, it was a buzzword back then where, the hardware and the software surrounding it was still kind of nascent. And I think now we're going to see a lot more. I mean, we already are seeing it like stores like Uniqlo. You can like fill up your basket, put it on the checkout, and it will RFID passive scan all of your items without having to do a barcode stuff.
Yep. I remember my dad, he was talking about, like, when we go to shows and stuff and they talk about RFID, and he's like, man, they've been talking about RFID for 20 years. I mean, like since the early 2000s, he's like, they've been talking about RFID this and that. And which is true. I mean, it's been a buzzword and a talking point for a long time now, but the tags were just so expensive back then that was one of those deals that sounded better in theory than practicality. And then, Walmart had the push with all of their, vendors or anything that's going to be, sold in Walmart's going to have a RFID tag on it. So that was a big push in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And they eventually saw that just wasn't going to be practical. And so now it's kind of jumping up again. I think they've talked about implementing it again if it's not already implemented, just because the tags are becoming a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I think they're still about 10 times more than traditional barcode stock.
Yeah.
But it's still, like you can print a barcode label for, I think, fractions of a penny.
Yep.
And RFID tags are running at like 40 cents a pop.
Yeah.
50.
I think too, it's a lot of just like managing the expectation of what the actual, say, like a warehouse manager is expecting, I guess, from the RFID technology within the warehouse. I think a lot of times they think it's just like this, they're going to have this magic wand and they can just wave back and forth and just kind of see their inventory. Whether if that's like from like, a pallet, like if they can just see pallets or like actually what's on the pallet, but there's a lot of things that kind of hinder RFID too.
I think that's true of a lot of technology. Specifically, I think that there's a misunderstanding of how much technology will replace process. And I think the ideal area is where your process is set up in such a way that it allows technology to be more efficient. So I think technology without efficient processes is a waste of money. And I think process without technology is inefficient.
Right.
So
that's
things
what I
kind
was
of
like
blending.
really that's what's like something that I thought was kind of cool too. Like learning more about software is like software is not going to replace a bad business process, right? Like if it's already like a faulty process or whatever within the warehouse or in the business or something, like software is not going to solve that. If it's like you have to like improve the process. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's kind of what I understood a little bit from like that discovery call that we had with the customer. Jeremy and his team, they really took time to understand like the process and everything that kind of went in to what the customer was trying to accomplish before they had, anything to do about the software of how that was going to help simplify that or automate it or whatever that might be. So I think that's, very important for any like warehouse professional listening that might just be using pen and paper or doesn't really have any type of software implemented in the warehouse right now, is to understand your processes, how things are working and, operating within the warehouse. So I don't know if you have any, insights on that, Jeremy. But I just thought
I would say before you go and spend money on software, you're probably better off taking a look at your own processes and asking yourself, is what I'm doing efficient and can I make it better before I go and spend millions of dollars on something that might not even help me? Because if you get a company that does process re-engineering or software, they're going to do that for you. And they're going to charge you a lot of money for it and take your own watch and tell you the time. So,
and I'd see it a little bit in my own personal life. Like if I'm like using AI or something to automate something, it's like, I want to make sure I know how to do it manually. And how is that process working manually before I even do anything like automated with AI? And I think that's very important. Anything that you're doing, how is it actually working before you just automate it? So another thing, you might be seeing right now is customer dissatisfaction. If you're a warehouse professional, if you might have returns and the customer is just not satisfied with the return process. So what they found in the survey is it was because of a lack of communication within the return process. So there wasn't enough communication about like the status of the update, if the package was actually returned to the warehouse, and what the refund process would be. So I think that's one way warehouses and businesses can, there's some opportunity there to help their customers with the whole customer experience, right? Is to have a better communication and let your customers know when their package arrived back into the warehouse. Hey, this return's being processed. Hey, this is when you can expect the refund. I think we're kind of spoiled as consumers with Amazon with that. So there's it kind of like that level of expectation that we expect from other companies. So I think that was like a no-brainer. That was, pretty obvious. When I read that in the survey, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think the root cause of that is just a lack of tracking from the vendor side. Like you can't communicate to the customer what information you don't have.
Exactly.
And so, a lot of it's going to start with companies determining that that's something they want to put effort into.
Mm-hmm.
Is implementing the software and the process around like really keeping track of where things are in the process. And maybe it's not worth it. Maybe it's just, too much money or too much effort. But
so like a few of the key survey insights that we got were there's just consistent challenges across industries. It doesn't matter if you're in T&L or e-com or retail, whatever it is, there's going to be constant challenges in returns. You're going to have issues like damaged or lost items during transit, human errors, like we've already discussed. So there's you're just going to have that across industries. Another thing that we saw was the hybrid approach to technology adoption. So most businesses are using a mix of modern technology and manual methods. So it's kind of indicating a preference toward a hybrid solution. And we've kind of seen a resistance to for a company being like fully automated in the return process. So there's a notable resistance to completely automating the return process is something that we've seen. And there's also varied investment levels and opportunities. So investment levels and returns management vary, indicating a need for customized solutions to optimize technology use within the budget constraints. So that was another thing too that I thought was interesting was some businesses thought they were handling their returns great and they didn't think there was really a problem at all. And then there were some that were like, we need to invest more in our returns process because we see that it is an area for growth. It's something that we can get better in. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that, Jeremy.
I think it's something that's a case by case for companies. For some companies that don't, it depends on how much volume you handle. I think it all depends on the data that you have. And I think this is true of any part of business is, can I make a decision that's supported by real numbers rather than just a gut feeling? Because gut feelings take you so far. But, if a company is only doing $1,000 in returns a year, it's probably not worth it to spend 10, 15 grand on a tracking solution when they can just make a small process change and account for those, small number of customers.
Yep. And I'd be interested too, if any warehouse professionals listening, if you listen or if you work for a 3PL that's just like works like in e-com, I would love to know like their return process, just to throw a name out there. I know like the 3PL Radial, that's like what they specialize in. It's just e-commerce warehousing. I'd like to know like how, they're handling the return process for their customers. And I'd be interested to learn like, if that's like one of their value adds, if they're adding value that way of like handling the return process for their customers since they're doing the warehousing as well. So it'd be interesting. Maybe we can get a guest on one day, Jeremy, and talk more about that because the return process is a pain point for every, I would say, e-commerce, retail, company out there. People are battling with returns, and it is a big pain point out there. So it'd be interesting to learn more about that process and what people are doing to kind of mitigate that issue. Well, yeah, that's about it. We just wanted to. That's about the end of the show, guys. We just wanted to kind of give you a background about me and Jeremy, where we come from, the partnership that we've created, and we're excited to keep that partnership going and going to see kind of how it evolves, from years to come, and how we can help our customers from a software and a hardware solution. And we hope you got some valuable insights from this survey from Blue Star. We appreciate them doing this survey. So maybe in the next show, we'll talk about some industry trends. And then also maybe we'll get some of you guys' feedback and, figure out different topics that we can talk about that just brings value, because ultimately that's what we're trying to do, is just to bring value for the end user. So with that, Jeremy, do you have anything else?
Nope. It's Friday. See you next week.
It's Friday. Let's thinking about that. You got any big plans for the weekend?
Sleep. Get some much needed sleep. Play some basketball.
I hear you.
You know how it is.
Right on. Yeah. I plan on playing a little golf. It's still a little warm down here in the South. So we're from Atlanta, Barco Depot. We're based about 45 minutes northeast of Atlanta. I don't think I mentioned that earlier. So that's where we're based out of. But yeah, we thank you guys for listening. We hope you got some value from this. We hope to hear some of your feedback. I will include this survey in the show notes. And also, you'll be able to find this show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, wherever you would listen to normal podcasts. And then also be on the lookout for us on LinkedIn. We're going to be posting these videos on LinkedIn, YouTube Shorts. You'll be seeing a newsletter. So we'll be redistributing this podcast through several different channels. So, but yeah, with that, we thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.